The Zephyrian War Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as Admiral Kethvar slammed his clawed fist against the metal table. The holographic display showed their latest defeat in vivid, humiliating detail. 3 more colony worlds lost to the human advance. 3 more strategic positions that would take cycles to reclaim if they ever could. 18 battles. General Mordak hissed, her serpentine tongue tasting the bitter air. 18 consecutive defeats against these primitive mammals. The word dripped with venom, though everyone in the room knew it was more hope than truth now. Commander Siltaith leaned forward, his chitinous armor clicking. Their technology isn't superior. Our weapons match theirs, sometimes exceed them. Our ships are faster, our shields stronger. Yet they keep winning. The hologram shifted to show captured footage of human soldiers in combat. The aliens watched in uncomfortable silence as the footage played. Human medics rushing into active fire zones to retrieve wounded comrades. Human soldiers covering retreats of their injured. Human commanders sacrificing tactical advantages to save a single wounded fighter. It's their obsession with preserving life, Admiral Kethvar said, studying the display. They throw away military advantages for sentiment. Sentiment that somehow translates into victory, General Mordak added coldly. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Each military leader present had lost friends, subordinates, entire fleets to human forces. What should have been an easy conquest of a single planet species had turned into their greatest military disaster in centuries. We need leverage, Admiral Kethvar said finally. Something to break their morale, force them to negotiate. Hostages, Commander Siltaith suggested. We've tried. They mount rescue operations for single prisoners that we wouldn't authorize for high-value targets. General Mordak's eyes glittered with predatory intelligence. What about their healers? These medical personnel they value so highly. The Admiral's attention sharpened. Continue. We captured intelligence about their military structure. They have specialized healing units, combat medics they call them. Soldiers trained specifically to preserve life in battle conditions. If their regular troops are so valued, imagine how they'd react to capturing one of these healers. Commander Siltaith pulled up tactical data. During the Battle of Kepler Station, we observed a single human medic treat 47 wounded soldiers while under direct fire. When our forces attempted to eliminate the healer, an entire human battalion redirected from their primary objective just to protect one individual. That's militarily insane, Admiral Kethvar said. Yet effective, Mordak replied. Their wounded returned to combat faster, fought harder, knowing medical aid was guaranteed. The Admiral studied the human medical data with growing interest. Combat survival rates, recovery times, psychological impacts of guaranteed medical care on troop morale. The numbers painted a picture of a military force that had weaponized compassion itself. If we capture one of these healers, he said slowly, we could force negotiations. They wouldn't risk their precious lifesaver. Where do we find one? Siltaith asked. Mordak was already pulling up intelligence reports. There's a human hospital ship in the outer spiral, the Asclepius, long-range medical vessel, lightly armed. Recent scans suggest they're treating wounded from the Perseus campaign. Ship specifications: minimal weapons, standard civilian shields, crew of 60 including medical staff. But here's the interesting part. Mordak's claws traced across the display. They have a specialized surgeon aboard. Major Elena Vasquez, veteran of 12 campaigns, decorated for treating enemy wounded alongside her own forces. Admiral Kethvar's predatory smile revealed rows of sharp teeth. A healer who treats enemies as well as allies? Even better, they'll negotiate for sure. What do we do with the healer once we have them? Commander Siltaith asked. The 3 military leaders exchanged glances. The answer hung unspoken in the chamber's recycled air. They all knew of the deep caves beneath their fortress world, knew of the creature they kept there, fed, and avoided. Their ancestors' greatest fear, now their civilization's darkest secret. The Devourer's Lair. General Mordak said quietly. Admiral Kethvar nodded slowly. The humans will receive a simple message. Their healer feeds our ancient guardian, or their advance stops permanently. The Devourer hasn't been fed in 3 cycles, Siltaith observed. It's probably hungry. Perfect timing then. The plan took shape with military precision. A small strike force would intercept the Asclepius during a routine supply transfer. Minimal casualties to avoid escalation, surgical extraction of the target. The human healer would disappear into their deepest stronghold, into chambers that had held their people's nightmares for millennia. General Mordak coordinated the assault personally. 3 stealth ships, elite boarding teams, electromagnetic pulse to disable the hospital ship's defenses. The operation proceeded flawlessly. Human security was light, focused more on protection than combat response. They found Major Elena Vasquez in the ship's primary surgical theater, working on a wounded human soldier. The alien boarding team expected resistance, weapons, desperate combat. Instead, they found a woman in blood-stained surgical scrubs who looked up from her patient with tired but determined eyes. I need 10 more minutes to stabilize him, she said calmly, returning to her work as if alien commandos were a minor interruption. The team leader, Captain Threshmock, was so surprised by the response that he almost granted the request. His training reasserted itself just in time. The human healer was secured, sedated, and transferred to their ship within standard extraction timeframes. During the journey to their fortress world, Captain Threshmock found himself watching the prisoner. Even unconscious, she seemed different from other humans they'd encountered. No visible weapons training, no combat augmentations, hands soft from surgical work rather than battle. Yet her medical record showed she'd served in the front lines of humanity's bloodiest campaigns. Why does a healer go to war? He asked his second-in-command. Humans are insane, came the reply. They probably forced her. But the captain studied the human service record more carefully. Volunteer assignments to the worst combat zones. Repeated tours despite opportunities for safer positions. Commendations for treating enemy wounded even when her own forces disapproved. This wasn't a forced conscript. This was someone who chose to bring healing to humanity's darkest places. The fortress world of Malachar loomed ahead, a planet-sized stronghold carved from solid rock over millennia. Deep in its core, past security barriers and blast doors that could withstand planetary bombardment, lay chambers older than their recorded history. Places where their ancestors had imprisoned things that shouldn't exist. The Devourer waited in the deepest chamber, a creature from their planet's primordial past that their species had never quite managed to kill. 60 feet of scaled horror, intelligent enough to be malicious, strong enough to tear through military-grade armor like paper. They'd learned over centuries that it preferred live prey, fed slowly, seemed to enjoy the fear and suffering of its meals. Major Elena Vasquez was brought to consciousness in a holding cell 3 levels above the creature's lair. Through reinforced transparisteel, she could see Admiral Kethvar and his staff observing her like a laboratory specimen. Major Vasquez, the Admiral's voice came through the cell's communication system. You have the honor of serving a greater purpose. Elena stood slowly, studying her captors with the same clinical attention she'd give to symptoms during diagnosis. And what purpose would that be? Your sacrifice will save countless lives. Your people will negotiate rather than see their precious healer consumed by our ancient guardian. Guardian? Elena looked genuinely curious. What kind of guardian? General Mordak stepped forward. The kind that has served our people for millennia. The Devourer below feeds, and our enemies learn the price of defying us. Elena nodded thoughtfully, as if she were considering a complex medical case. How long since it last ate? The question surprised them. Most prisoners begged, threatened, or wept. This human was asking about feeding schedules. 3 standard cycles, Commander Siltaith answered before thinking. Metabolic rate? What? If it's been 3 cycles without food, its metabolic processes have probably slowed. Digestive enzymes depleted, muscle mass reduced. It's likely quite weak by now. Admiral Kethvar felt an unexpected chill. This human was analyzing their guardian like a medical condition. It's still dangerous enough to serve our purposes, he said firmly. Elena smiled, and for the first time since her capture, her expression showed something other than professional calm. I'm sure it is. May I see this guardian of yours? The request was so unexpected that the three senior officers exchanged confused glances. They'd expected terror, desperation, perhaps bargaining. They had not expected scientific curiosity. You'll see it soon enough, General Mordak said. Will I have access to medical supplies? You're going to be eaten, Commander Siltaith said bluntly. What possible use could you have for medical supplies? Elena's smile widened slightly. You'd be surprised what a healer can do with the right tools. Admiral Kethvar studied the human through the transparent steel barrier. Something about her confidence was deeply unsettling. This was not how prey behaved. This was how predators behaved when they spotted weakness. Prepare the transfer, he ordered. Send word to the human fleet. They have 24 standard hours to begin withdrawal from contested systems, or their healer becomes our guardian's next meal. As the guards prepared to move her to the deeper levels, Elena Vasquez asked one final question. This guardian of yours, it's been in captivity for millennia? Contained, Admiral Kethvar corrected. Not captive. We are its caretakers. Elena's expression shifted to something the aliens couldn't quite read. Professional interest, mixed with what might have been sympathy. I see. Well then, I suppose it's time I met my patient. The word patient echoed in the chamber long after the guards escorted her away, leaving the three military leaders with an uncomfortable feeling that they had fundamentally misunderstood something critical about the situation they created. The descent into Malakar's depths took nearly an hour through corridors carved from living rock millennia ago. Elena Vasquez studied every detail during the journey, noting the architectural transitions from modern military construction to something far more ancient. The walls gradually changed from clean metal surfaces to rough stone blocks fitted together with primitive but effective engineering. Her Zephyrian guards grew more nervous the deeper they went. She could see it in their body language, the way their natural predator confidence gave way to ancestral fear. Whatever waited below had shaped their entire civilization's psychology. Tell me about your guardian, Elena said to Captain Thresmock as they descended another level. It's not our guardian, he replied curtly. We are its guardians. Interesting distinction. How long have you been keeping it? Keeping it. The captain's laugh held no humor. We contain it. There's a difference. Elena nodded as if she understood perfectly. Containment requires constant resources. Food, environmental controls, structural maintenance. That's quite a commitment across millennia. The alternative is worse. Which is... Captain Thresmock stopped walking and turned to face her. His predatory features showed genuine concern. Human, you don't understand what you're about to face. The Devourer is older than our recorded history. Our ancestors found it in these caves when they first colonized this world. They couldn't kill it, so they learned to feed it, contain it, keep it satisfied. What did they feed it originally? Criminals, enemies, sacrifices. He resumed walking. Whatever kept it calm. Elena absorbed this information with the same clinical detachment she'd shown everything else. And you believe feeding it enemy prisoners serves a dual purpose: disposal of problems and maintenance of containment. It's worked for thousands of years. They reached a massive blast door marked with warnings in multiple languages. Ancient Zephyrian script mixed with more recent additions in a dozen alien tongues. All conveyed the same message: death waited beyond. Captain Thresmock input his authorization codes. The door groaned open, revealing a chamber that looked like it belonged to a completely different world. Natural cavern formations stretched into darkness beyond their lights. The air carried a smell Elena recognized from her medical training: infection, decay, and something else. Something wrong. The Devourer waits in the deepest chamber, Thresmock said. We'll lower you down on a platform. Traditional protocol. Elena examined the crude elevator system with professional interest. How many have you fed it over the centuries? Hundreds? Thousands? Does it matter? It matters if you want to understand why your traditional protocol isn't working anymore. The captain paused. What do you mean? Elena pointed to the cavern walls. Look at the erosion patterns, the calcium deposits, the bacterial formations. This environment has been isolated for millennia, but it's not stable. It's dying. The devourer is immortal. Nothing is immortal, Captain. Everything can get sick. Everything can be healed. She smiled that unsettling smile again. Everything can be treated. The platform descended into absolute darkness, broken only by their portable lights. Elena studied the rock formations with growing professional interest. Mineral deposits suggested high acidity levels. Chemical residue indicated massive digestive processes. But the patterns were wrong, inconsistent with healthy metabolism. Captain, when was the last time your guardian was truly active? Not just eating, but moving, hunting, showing vitality. Threshmock considered the question. It's always been sluggish. We assumed that was normal. How many prisoners has it refused to eat in recent cycles? The question hit unexpectedly close to home. Threshmock remembered the reports. 3 prisoners in the last cycle alone had been returned to the surface uneaten. Command had attributed it to the creature being well fed. A few, he admitted reluctantly. Appetite loss is usually the first symptom, Elena said matter-of-factly. The platform reached the bottom of the cavern system. Their lights revealed a chamber the size of a small city, carved from natural stone formations over geological time. At the center, on what might once have been a small hill, lay the devourer. Elena's first thought was how magnificent it must have been in its prime. 60 feet of muscled serpentine body, scales that would have gleamed like armor, a head large enough to swallow a small vehicle. Ancient beyond measure and probably intelligent enough to understand its own predicament. Her second thought was how sick it looked. The scales had lost their luster, showing a grayish pallor consistent with circulation problems. The massive body showed signs of muscle wasting. One eye was clouded with what looked like cataracts. The breathing was labored, irregular. This wasn't a mighty guardian waiting to devour enemies. This was a geriatric patient in desperate need of medical attention. "Oh, you poor thing," Elena said softly. The devourer's head lifted slightly at the sound of her voice. The unclouded eye focused on her with surprising intelligence. For a moment, predator and prey studied each other across the ancient chamber. "It's looking at you," Captain Threshmock said nervously. "Of course it is. I'm probably the first medically trained person it's seen in centuries." Elena stepped forward, professional instincts overriding any sense of self-preservation. "Stay back. It will attack." The devourer made a sound that might have been a roar millennia ago, but came out as more of a wheeze. The massive head lowered back to the stone floor with obvious exhaustion. Elena knelt at the edge of the platform, bringing herself closer to the creature's eye level. "You're dying, aren't you?" she said gently. "Malnutrition, probably. Digestive disorders from an inappropriate diet. Likely vitamin deficiencies, mineral imbalances. When did you last hunt your natural prey?" The eye blinked slowly. Elena took it as acknowledgement. "Human, what are you doing?" Captain Threshmock demanded. "Making a diagnosis," Elena replied without taking her eyes off the creature. "Your guardian is suffering from chronic malnutrition. The prisoners you've been feeding it aren't providing proper nutrition. Different alien biochemistries, probably wrong mineral content, definitely wrong nutritional balance. It's a predator. It eats meat. It's a predator adapted to hunt specific prey in a specific environment. You've been feeding it the wrong food in the wrong place for thousands of years. That's like trying to keep a deep-sea fish alive in a desert." Elena stood and began examining the chamber with new eyes. She pulled a small medical scanner from her uniform pocket, one of the few items her captors hadn't confiscated. "What are you scanning?" Threshmock asked suspiciously. "Environmental conditions. Atmospheric composition, mineral content, humidity levels." The scanner beeped softly as it analyzed the cavern. "Just as I thought. This chamber is too dry, wrong atmospheric pressure, and The mineral content in the water supply is completely wrong for a creature of this type. The devourer made another wheezing sound, almost like it was trying to communicate. Elena approached closer, and this time Captain Thrushmock didn't stop her. "I know," she said soothingly. "You've been sick for a very long time, haven't you? Probably been trying to tell them something was wrong, but they interpreted your distress as aggression." She turned to the captain. "I need to examine it properly. Do you have any medical equipment in this facility? You're going to examine the devourer?" Thrushmock's voice cracked slightly. "I'm going to treat it. That's what healers do. It will kill you." Elena looked at the massive, ailing creature and then back at the terrified guard. "Captain, when was the last time this guardian of yours actually killed anyone?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Thrushmock realized with growing horror that he couldn't remember. Command assumed the creature was dangerous because it had always been dangerous. But actual deaths? Actual attacks? What had those last occurred? "The medical bay," he said weakly. "There's a medical facility on the surface level." "Good. I'll need basic diagnostic equipment, mineral supplements, probably antibiotics if you have any that work on this species. And I'll need environmental controls if you want to fix this properly." "Fix what?" Elena gestured at the dying creature. "Your guardian has been slowly starving to death for centuries, probably suffering from multiple chronic conditions, and you've been interpreting its illness as aggressive behavior. No wonder it can't serve as an effective deterrent anymore." The truth hit Captain Thrushmock like a weapon blast. Command's great secret, their ancient terror, their ultimate threat, was actually a patient that needed medical care. "The human fleet," he said suddenly. "If we don't sacrifice you to the Guardian, Admiral Kethvar's threats become meaningless." Elena smiled that calm, professional smile. "Captain, by the time I'm finished treating your Guardian, it might actually be capable of being the terror your ancestors remember. The question is, do you want a sick, dying creature that can barely lift its head, or do you want to restore what was probably the apex predator of this entire planetary ecosystem?" The devourers, I tracked their conversation with obvious intelligence. Elena had the distinct impression it understood every word. "But why would you help us?" Thrushmock asked. "We captured you to feed you to that thing." "Because I'm a healer," Elena said simply. "I treat patients regardless of politics, species, or circumstances. That creature is suffering, and I can't help it. The fact that helping it might also serve your military purposes is secondary to my professional obligations." She paused and looked directly at the massive eye watching them. "Besides, something that intelligent and that ancient deserves better than slow death in a cave. Even if it was a predator, even if it was dangerous, it deserves proper medical care." Captain Thrushmock felt his worldview shifting in ways that made him fundamentally uncomfortable. He'd been raised to fear the devourer, taught that it represented chaos barely contained by civilization. But this human was looking at their ancient nightmare like it was just another patient in need of help. "I have to contact command," he said. "Of course. But while you're doing that, could you start arranging for that medical equipment? Time is critical with patients in this condition." As Thrushmock activated his communications device to contact the surface, Elena returned her attention to the devourer. The great eye blinked slowly, almost like gratitude. "Don't worry," she said softly. "We'll get you feeling better. Though I should warn you, proper treatment might mean significant lifestyle changes. Less lying around in caves, more exercise, definitely a better diet." The creature made a sound that Elena chose to interpret as agreement. In the background, she could hear Captain Thrushmock trying to explain to his superiors that their ancient guardian was actually a patient, and their human prisoner was volunteering to serve as its doctor. The conversation was not going well. Elena didn't mind. She had a patient to treat, and everything else was secondary to that fundamental duty. Even if the patient in question could have swallowed her whole in its prime. Even if treating it successfully might restore one of the most dangerous creatures in known space. Admiral Kethvar stared at Captain Thrushmock through the communication screen with an expression that suggested someone had just told him the laws of physics had been repealed. "Repeat that report, Captain." "Sir, The human prisoner has diagnosed the devourer with chronic malnutrition and multiple systemic health conditions. She's requesting medical supplies to begin treatment. Treatment. The word came out flat, emotionless. Yes, sir. She believes the creature has been slowly dying for centuries, and that proper medical intervention could restore its health and effectiveness. General Mordak leaned into view, her serpentine features twisted with confusion. Captain, are you saying our ancient guardian is sick? According to the human healer, yes, ma'am. Severely sick. She says that's why it hasn't been effective as a deterrent recently. It's been too ill to function properly. Admiral Kethvar rubbed his forehead with both hands. How is the human prisoner giving medical examinations to a creature that should have eaten her by now? The devourer appears to be too weak to attack, sir. It can barely lift its head. The silence that followed this statement lasted long enough for Captain Threshmock to wonder if the communication link had failed. Finally, Admiral Kethvar spoke with the careful tone of someone trying to maintain sanity in an insane situation. Captain, escort the human to Medical Base 7. Provide her with whatever supplies she requires. And Captain? Yes, sir. Have medical teams standing by to treat both the human and any injury she sustains during this treatment attempt. Understood, sir. Elena Vasquez found herself in the unusual position of being escorted to a medical facility by guards who seemed more nervous about her helping their ancient weapon than they had been about feeding her to it. Medical Bay 7 turned out to be a fully equipped field hospital with diagnostic equipment that would have been impressive on any human vessel. Your medical technology is excellent, she commented, examining a bioscanner that could probably map genetic sequences in real time. Military medicine has always been a priority, Captain Threshmock replied absently. He was still processing the complete reversal of his understanding of reality. Elena loaded a transport cart with diagnostic equipment, mineral supplements, antibiotics, and what looked like enough medical supplies to treat a small army. I'll need regular communication access to monitor progress and request additional supplies. You really think you can heal it? I think I can help it. Healing is a partnership between doctor and patient. But first, I need to complete a proper examination. The descent back to the Devourer's chamber felt different this time. The ancient creature had managed to lift its head when they returned and was watching Elena with unmistakable attention. Those ancient, intelligent eyes tracked every piece of equipment she brought into the chamber. Hello again, Elena said gently, approaching with the same calm confidence she'd show any patient. I brought some things that should help us figure out exactly what's been troubling you. She activated the bioscanner and began the most unusual medical examination of her career. The readings that came back were both fascinating and alarming. The creature's basic physiology was unlike anything in her medical databases, but the symptoms were universal: malnutrition, mineral deficiencies, chronic pain from arthritis-like conditions, and what appeared to be a digestive system that had been functioning incorrectly for centuries. Your natural diet, she said to the devourer, probably consisted of deep cave minerals, specific types of stone, and maybe some form of underground plant life. You're not actually designed to eat meat at all, are you? The great head moved slightly in what might have been a nod. Captain Threshmock, who had been watching this interaction with growing amazement, said, Not designed to eat meat, but it's killed hundreds of prisoners over the centuries. Elena looked up from her scanner readings. Captain, if you were starving to death and someone kept bringing you food that made you sicker, but it was the only food available, what would you do? The captain considered this. I suppose I'd eat it anyway, even if it made me feel worse. Exactly. The devourer has been slowly poisoning itself for millennia on a diet of alien proteins. Its digestive system can't process properly. It probably ate prisoners because it was desperate and hungry, not because that was its preferred food source. She turned back to the creature. The good news is most of this is treatable. The mineral deficiencies can be corrected, the digestive problems can be healed, and we can work on getting you back to your natural diet. Elena spent the next several hours administering treatments that would have seemed absurd to anyone who hadn't spent their career dealing with the impossible. She gave the galaxy's most feared predator vitamin injections, administered antibiotics for infected scales, and set up mineral supplement drips that fed into the creature's system through specialized medical ports. The Devourer submitted to all of this with patient cooperation, as if it understood that help had finally arrived after millennia of suffering. The transformation won't be immediate, Elena explained to Captain Thresmock as she worked. Chronic conditions take time to heal, but we should see improvement within days, significant improvement within weeks. And if it does heal, if it becomes what it was originally meant to be. Elena paused in her work and looked at the massive creature that was already showing signs of improved breathing. Captain, your ancestors probably encountered one of the most magnificent apex predators in galactic history. If my treatment succeeds, you'll have that creature restored to full health and vitality. That's what concerns me. Why? Isn't that what you wanted? An effective guardian? Captain Thresmock struggled to articulate his growing unease. We've controlled it for thousands of years by keeping it weak and sick. If it becomes healthy, becomes what it was meant to be, will we still be able to control it? Elena smiled that calm, professional smile. Captain, that's not really a medical question. But I will say this. Intelligent creatures usually respond better to partnership than imprisonment. Over the following days, Elena established a routine that would have been unthinkable to previous generations of Zephyrians. She arrived each morning in the Devourer's chamber, checked vital signs, administered treatments, and talked to the ancient creature like it was any other patient. The transformation was remarkable. Within a week, the Devourer's scales had regained much of their luster. The clouded eye cleared. The labored breathing became strong and regular. Most remarkably, the creature began to move with something approaching its original grace and power. Admiral Kethvar made the journey to the depths personally to witness the change. What he found challenged everything his species believed about their ancient guardian. The Devourer was awake, alert, and clearly healthier than it had been in living memory. It was also clearly bonded to the human healer who had restored its health. Major Vasquez, he said formally, your treatment appears to be successful. Thank you, Admiral. Though I should point out that full recovery will require ongoing care and significant changes to diet and environment. What kind of changes? Elena gestured to the cave system around them. This chamber needs to be reconfigured to match the creature's natural habitat requirements. Different atmospheric composition, mineral-rich water supplies, access to the types of stone and minerals it naturally consumes. Basically, you need to transform this from a prison into a proper ecosystem. The Devourer raised its magnificent head and looked directly at Admiral Kethvar. For the first time in the Admiral's life, he truly understood why his ancestors had feared this creature. Healthy and alert, it radiated an intelligence and power that was genuinely intimidating. But something else was different too. The malice that Zephyrian legend attributed to the creature was absent. Instead, there was curiosity, even what might have been gratitude. Has it become less dangerous? Admiral Kethvar asked. Has it become less capable of violence? No. If anything, restoring its health has made it far more formidable than it was. But dangerous depends on intent and circumstances. Elena reached out and gently touched one of the creature's massive scales. Most predators aren't randomly violent. They're violent when threatened, when hunting, or when protecting territory. This one has been in pain for so long that pain was its normal state. Now that the pain is gone, the Devourer made a sound that was clearly communication rather than threat. Deep, complex tones that suggested a sophisticated language. It's trying to talk to us, Elena realized. Admiral, I think your species has been misunderstanding this creature for millennia. It's not just intelligent, it's trying to communicate. Admiral Kethvar listened to the complex tonal patterns and felt another piece of his worldview crumble. We always assumed the sounds were roars, hunting calls. They might have been originally, but isolation does things to intelligent minds. It's possible the devourer has been trying to communicate for centuries, and your people interpreted communication attempts as threats. Over the following weeks, Elena continued her treatments while working with Zephyrian linguists to decode the devourer's communication patterns. What they discovered revolutionized both species' understanding of the situation. The creature called itself something that roughly translated to Deep Singer, and had originally been the apex predator of Malakar's extensive underground ecosystem. It wasn't naturally aggressive towards surface dwellers, and had actually been as surprised by first contact with the Zephyrians as they had been by it. The centuries of imprisonment had been as traumatic for Deep Singer as they had been security providing for the Zephyrians. The creature had tried repeatedly to communicate, to establish some form of relationship other than predator and prey, but pain, illness, and cultural misunderstanding had made meaningful contact impossible. So, what happens now? Admiral Kethvar asked Elena during one of her progress reports. That depends on what your people want, Elena replied. You could continue the old system, keeping Deep Singer imprisoned as a symbolic guardian. But now that it's healthy, that would require much more robust security, and you'd be wasting the potential of one of the most remarkable intelligent creatures I've ever encountered. Or you could try something unprecedented. Partnership. Deep Singer is incredibly ancient, probably has knowledge of this planet that could benefit your entire civilization. It's intelligent enough to understand complex negotiations, powerful enough to be genuinely useful as a protector rather than just a threat, and now healthy enough to engage productively with your society. Admiral Kethvar looked at the magnificent creature that Elena had restored from a dying prisoner to a vibrant apex predator. And what does Deep Singer want? Elena smiled. Why don't you ask it? I suspect, after millennia of imprisonment, it might have some interesting perspectives to share. The negotiations that followed would enter galactic history as the first formal treaty between a spacefaring civilization and a planetary apex predator. Deep Singer, now fully healed and communicating effectively, proved to be a sophisticated negotiator with a deep understanding of both ecology and politics. The final agreement transformed Malakar from a fortress world into a unique partnership. Deep Singer would serve as the planet's guardian and ecological consultant, while the Zephyrians would restore and maintain the underground ecosystem that had been damaged by millennia of containment efforts. Elena found herself appointed as the first xenological medical consultant to an interspecies partnership, a position that didn't exist in any military manual, but seemed essential to maintaining the relationship between species that had spent millennia misunderstanding each other. When the human fleet finally arrived to negotiate Elena's release, they found a situation that no military strategist had ever planned for. Their captured healer had not only survived imprisonment with a legendary monster, but had cured it, befriended it, and helped establish an interspecies alliance that was already changing the balance of power in the region. Admiral Kethvar met the human negotiation team with Elena at his side and Deep Singer visible on the communication screens, restored to full magnificent health. Admiral Chun, he said to the human fleet commander, "We need to discuss new terms for our relationship. It seems your healer has made some changes to our civilization that affect previous negotiations." Elena looked at the two fleets facing each other and at the ancient creature that had become both patient and friend. "Maybe we can talk about how healers approach diplomacy," she suggested. "It turns out most conflicts look different when you focus on treating the underlying conditions instead of just managing the symptoms." Deep Singer's harmonic communication filled the channel, and Elena smiled as she translated. "It says that healing and partnership usually work better than containment and fear." Apparently, that's true whether you're dealing with individual patients or entire civilizations. The war that had seemed inevitable a few weeks before transformed into the most unusual alliance in galactic history. All because someone had finally thought to ask if the monster in the cave needed a doctor rather than a sacrifice.